ID is invalid. Please re-enter your meeting ID followed by the pound sign.
8 0 8 1.
Please enter the meeting passcode followed by the pound sign.
Okay. Oh, are we on? Okay, great. Good afternoon. This meeting is now convened. The time is 4:07 p.m. I would like to ask that everyone please silence your cell phones. Quorum of the board members is present in the board auditorium, and they are from my right here on the platform: Cassandra Ozanne Bandy, Jeanette Garza Lindner, myself, Audrey Momanai, Paula Mendoza, and Adam Ravon. We have a couple of board members who are either joining us or will be joining us via Zoom, and I see Mr. Campo is joining us via Zoom. Hi, Rick. Is anybody else on right now via Zoom? Okay, very good. Okay, if there are any public officials in the audience this afternoon, please stand and be recognized. I don't see anybody quite yet. Okay, great. Our first order of business is to hear from our registered speakers to agenda items in the order in which they signed in today, although we will prioritize public officials and students. Public comment during school board meetings will only be available to those persons who have signed up to speak prior to the meeting time per current protocol. Verbal and other disruptions by persons during the school board meetings are not acceptable, as they inhibit the board's ability to conduct business and the public's ability to observe those processes. Persons who participate in such behavior will be given one warning, and if the behavior is repeated, they will be asked to leave the meeting. Tonight, we have 35 registered speakers who will be limited to 1 minute each per board policy, as we have more than 30 people signed up to address the board. We ask that you please stay on topic and refrain from naming individuals, especially students, as their identity is protected under the law. But you may name your own child. I ask that you please respect our procedures and the other speakers and end your comments promptly when your time has expired and the timer rings. We will start with public officials. I believe State Senator Molly Cook signed up to speak via Zoom. Is she on Zoom? Okay, very good. State Senator Cook, please go ahead.
Hi, this is State Senator Molly Cook. I use she pronouns representing the 15th District in Texas. And I'm just tuning in to say that the public's trust has still not been established in this bond. We are not supportive of a bond until we can build trust with this board. And I will tell you that folks do understand that school combination plays out exactly the same way as school closure. And we are not supportive of school closures. I don't know a single person in my district that would be supportive of that. So without trust in what y'all are doing, we are never going to be supportive of a bond. And we do not support school combination or school. So just wanted to make it that. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. I have next on the list Trustee Savant Moore, but I don't see him here quite yet. Okay, so we'll come back. And then I also have Judith Cruz. Okay. We will now hear from speakers who identified themselves as students when they checked in this evening. Our first student is Adita Sage Bittner. Okay, go ahead, Sydney.
Hi, my name is Adita Sage Bittner, and I'm a 5th grader at Conta Elementary School. Roses are red, violets are blue. You've taken our fun and our libraries too. Kids are worried about what's happening in our school. Mike Miles has been spending money on things like spin bikes that don't directly support learning. He is also disrespectful of teachers and principals. This has made our schools less fun and less safe. Trust is Board of Managers. If you approve this bond, it means giving more money to people who don't use it wisely. Trust is very important. Stephen Covey, the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, said trust is the glue of life. Right now, we don't have trust in our leaders. We need leaders who care about us and our teachers who spend money carefully. Until we have that, we shouldn't approve this bond. Remember, no trust, no bond. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next student speaker is Luca Candida.
Is there a translator?
Sure. Emily, translator. We don't have translation?
Okay, I'll do it.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Can we make sure that there's 2 minutes? Okay. Go ahead, sweetie.
Cuando mi madre me contó que el dinero de Texas había a Colorado, dije que deberíamos llamar a 911 porque el señor Miles es un ladrón. El señor Miles también...
So when my mother told me that money from Texas went to Colorado, I told her we need to call 911 because Mr. Miles is a thief.
El señor Miles también es un matón y muchos buenos maestros se han ido a otros distritos gracias a él.
So Mr. Miles is also a bully, and many good teachers have gone to other districts thanks to him.
¿Quién será mi maestro en segundo grado? ¿Estará certificada?
So who will my teacher be in second grade? Will they be certified?
El señor Miles no está certificado ni calificado para ser superintendente.
So Mr. Miles isn't certified, and he's not qualified to be a superintendent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tracy Lazowski. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I am a proponent of process and data, believing both will put one in the best position to make informed decisions. The process for Regulation CT2 requires community engagement prior to the closing of a school. Notably absent from CT2 are co-locations and consolidations. Superintendent Miles, I humbly ask that you amend CT2 to include co-locations and consolidations. As these decisions disproportionately affected our Black and Brown communities, community engagement is the equitable thing to do. Managers, I do not expect CT2 to be amended as requested. Therefore, I ask that as part of your vote on August 8th that you require community engagement. True engagement with each impacted campus to take place prior to decisions being made. You have one chance to get this right. As the entire HISD community now understands what affects one school will affect all schools, and we are all paying attention. No trust, no bond.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, I cannot access the file. Can you just call out the next speaker?
All right.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. As a former teacher in HISD, I decided to leave for Fort Bend due to concerns over HISD's uncertain leadership. At Fort Bend's new teacher orientation, I noticed that over 99% of the new teachers were from here in HISD, which highlights the district's current challenge. As of 3 p.m. today, there are over 1,242 teaching vacancies with less than a month before school starts. This significant number of vacancies underscores the urgency and impact of decisions regarding appointments, reassignments, and terminations. I deeply care about my former students and hope these vacancies won't affect the students back there in the back that just spoke. Additionally, the closure of libraries due to the NES system raises concerns about students being able to read at grade level. Team centers do not adequately serve underserved and underprivileged students. How can HISD prepare students for your mission, Mr. Miles, 2035, if they remove the most essential resource in schools?
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Hoffman-Locke.
I bet y'all are tired. This has been a doozy, huh? This has been a rough week. I don't know about y'all. We didn't have power till last night. In the middle of the craziness, my parents, who are 81 and both have Alzheimer's, the generator at their place went out. And so even though no one in the family had electricity, we still had to go get them. So at least somebody was making sure they weren't dying. And Centerpoint is getting a lot of trouble for this because they should have seen and they should have been prepared and they should have done their due diligence. And people died. And y'all are about to be in that same situation, because it's really clear that this man is not honest. And if you read the Texas Observer's article today, it is very clear that his Third Futures system has been breaking the law in Texas And so y'all now cannot claim plausible deniability. And you have a fiduciary and moral responsibility to not promote giving him more money. It would be unconscionable.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Christy Brewster.
Good afternoon. I'm Christy Michelle Brewster, retired school nurse, 35 years of service. The F. Mike Mile loves the hospital model concept. So here's a good analogy. This management regime for Houston ISD is like a painful kidney stone to our community. Why? It shows complete incompetence, still having the overseer-style observation of the teachers, the poorly done curriculums, and now you're sending students to the schools with heat, without air, and what I'm hearing, they got peanut butter sandwiches in a snack bag because I guess they didn't have food. No transparency. You don't tell us anything, you just do everything. Why should you tell the stakeholder anything? Financial despair, just spending our money hand over fist. But we, the people, got a treatment for this kidney stone. In the medical field, it's called lithotripsy. Shockwaves, and that's what we do when we stand up, speak up, and speak out. But we'll
Thank you.
speak more in November. No trust.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Maria Benzon.
Hello, my name is Maria Benzon. I'm here as a concerned parent and as a voice for countless others who share a deep concern about HISD. Today, the Texas Observer's article highlighted how Mr. Miles has been involved in a series of controversial actions. First, resources for students have been squandered, whether it's a $400,000 musical production at NRG, buying adult-sized spin bikes for kids, paying central administrator salaries over $200,000. The pattern of financial mismanagement is undeniable. How can we, in good conscience, approve a bond when we have seen such a blatant disregard for the careful stewardship of funds? Trust is the cornerstone of any organization, any thriving organization. Without it, we are building on it a foundation of sand. How can we place our trust in leadership that has repeatedly shown itself to be unworthy? I urge you to listen to the voices of the community. We cannot in good faith support a bond when the current administration has proven time and again that they cannot be trusted to manage these funds responsibly. Remember, no trust, no bond.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Denise Wilborn.
Friends know I'm a repeat offender at these board meetings. They are ethical, moral people active in social justice issues, including public education and taxation without representation or accountability. They are deeply concerned about this proposed bond. They usually support bonds, especially for our kids, and are aware HISD schools do need upgrades and updates. I tell them the appointed, not elected, board and the appointed superintendent can't be held accountable by this community. And I'm going to start sharing today's headlines with them from the Texas Standard Report. Mike Miles moved Texas school funds to Colorado through a possible shell corporation without a paper trail. An observer investigation has found irregularities in how the Houston ISD superintendent's Colorado charter school nonprofit did business right here in Texas. I wonder what other irregularities there are. Can y'all be trusted with taxpayers' money?
Thank you, ma'am.
No trust, no bond.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Diana Candida.
My name is Diana Candida, speaking about the bond. Board of Managers, it is irresponsible to put the bond on the ballot. Mr. Miles cannot be trusted with our money. In an article in the Texas Observer regarding Texas money going to third future schools in Colorado, U.S. Representative Sylvia Garcia stated, "The TEA is responsible for this undemocratic takeover and implanting Mike Miles in our district. TEA investigating Mike Miles is like the fox guarding the henhouse. Our children's education is at stake. An independent, unbiased review is needed to ensure federal dollars have not been misspent or misused. Accountability and transparency are non-negotiable. If we leave this up to the state and governor's cronies, we will lose our public school system before our eyes. As citizens, parents, and taxpayers yourselves, not only should you block Mr. Miles's attempts to get the bond on the ballot, but if it does make it there, you need to vote no. No trust, no bond."
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Melissa Yarborough.
Good afternoon. Do you know what no trust means when we say no trust, no bond? You say that you support families, but you have eliminated effective wraparound services, and you have NES schools refusing to participate in the family and community engagement program. And you prohibit principals from communicating AC problems with parents. You say you're improving instruction, but you have removed qualified teachers and replaced them with unqualified ones. And you are replacing relevant, rigorous curricula with STAR Prep. You say you're creating equity, but in the most under-resourced schools, you have eliminated libraries. And you are wasting funds on unwanted spin bikes. And you are increasing hours that students spend with unqualified, uncertified individuals. That's not equity. You say you'll do the right thing with bond funds, but you have proven time and time again to do the opposite of what you claim. And that's why we say...
Thank you. Our next speaker is Joni Fincham.
Good afternoon, Board of Managers. If the bond goes on the ballot in November, the question for voters isn't whether HISD needs a bond. We know it does. The question is whether we can trust you, the appointed board, and Mike Miles with the largest bond in Texas history. The lack of transparency, accountability, and community engagement this past school year was astonishing and frustrating, to say the least. So my question for you, Board of Managers, is what will you do to earn the trust of voters between now and November? Will you personally engage with the families who will be affected by the proposed co-location of schools? Will you actually answer their emails and take their phone calls? Will you provide the public with a complete accounting on how the proposed bond addresses HISD's declining enrollment? Because the information now doesn't make sense. Will you bring back our libraries? Will you make sure we have certified teachers in the classrooms? All these things could go a long way in building trust. Because so far, the actions and decisions of this administration and board have shown you cannot be trusted to oversee $4.4 billion of taxpayer funds. No trust, no bond.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Brooke Longoria.
Hi, good afternoon. I am Brooke Longoria, and the shirt that I'm wearing this afternoon was chosen by my daughter. It's loud, and she said that it would maybe help me be heard and seen by you all, so here's hoping. Please consider listening to the many voices from over the past few months who have told you as loud as they can that this is not the time for a bond. Bond proposals can fail, and this is an opportunity for you to stop the process, to listen to the community, to hit pause and know that this can come later. This can come at a different date. And then also, like, when folks say that, like, bonds span multiple administrations, this is the foundation. This is what the community doesn't want. They don't want this foundation. They don't want this start. They don't want this beginning. They want us to wait and do something different. So,
Thank you. Our next speaker is Corey Flores.
Good afternoon. My name is Corey Flores. We don't trust Mr. Miles because he's a sneaky, cherry-picking data lover and loophole finder. He enlisted the former owner of our trusted grocery chain to use our children to sell a bond he will use to further wreck our district. And you are all complicit when you don't stand up to him. There are no surprises anymore. You all know better now. You know he will rebuild schools with no libraries in them. You know he will rebuild schools with 50-person classrooms to avoid that pesky fire code rule and use his new failing apprentice system. We've already seen what he does with money, $1 million in spin bikes, classrooms with multiple smart boards while others have none, repainting entire campuses instead of replacing their badly broken HVAC systems. I live right down the street from Mrs. Flowers' esteemed school. In my one block there are 8 UK students. When our students play together, they are all the same. And while I don't expect my public education students to have extravagant international festivals or meticulously groomed campuses, I expect them to have what I know you all know is necessary for a quality education.
Thank you, ma'am.
A library,
Ma'am.
librarians, real books,
Ma'am.
experience,
Ma'am, your minute is up.
and reasonable class sizes.
Thank you.
I know you all know this.
Ma'am.
No trust.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Calvin Miller. Yes, sir.
Yes, if we the people no longer have the right to vote our own elected employees in and out, why would we the people give dictatorship of the TEA another blank check known as a bond? The TEA take everything away, doesn't have to listen to the constituents or get their input about anything, including how they spend their tax dollars. The infrastructure is now in place to charter the entire district when and if they decide to do so. They have support from the state, a state-appointed superintendent, a board of managers, our money, our property tax, buildings, and dictatorship. Previous bonds have passed every 4 to 6 years, the last 26 years. In 98, 678 million in 02, 808 million in 07, 805 million in 2012, 1.9 billion total, 4.3 billion in 14 years. However, a bond passing does not mean that the schools was built or constructed in a timely fashion. Some of the same schools was built or constructed or has even closed. They may be a different bond with a much bigger price tag, but this particular one has a legislation with a state-appointed superintendent, a board of managers that has no power to do whatever they choose to do without we the people's approval. Even though NEA's not even sure system experiment has been proven, they are considering a bond that possibly exceeds
Thank you, sir.
$5 billion. No trust.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ruth Kravitz. Ms. Kravitz?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your time and your commitment. Today's Texas Observer Report should serve as a warning to all the Board of Managers here. The TFS Texas Board, like the HISD Board, are just figureheads if you don't do your jobs. While legally required to oversee the public ed dollars entrusted to them, the Texas Third Future School Board did nothing. Ector and Midland County ISD sent all state and federal funds they received to Colorado, where Miles and his friends decided what to do with all the money, not the Texas board that was legally obligated to oversee it. Similarly, HISD's Board of Managers has failed its fiduciary duty to ensure that Houston public ed funds be spent for the benefit of Houston ISD school children. If Miles replicates his actions from Midland County, Ector County, and Austin ISD, the Board of Managers here will be legally culpable for the outcome. Please vote no.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Brandy Dowda.
My name is Brandy Dowda, and I'm here to address the board concerning the bond. Ms. Cruz-Arnold, Ms. Bandy, Mr. Martinez, and Mr. Rivon, so far you are the only Board of Managers members who have shown the slightest inkling of having a backbone, so I will be addressing you. You have seen Mr. Miles this past year destroy HISD, getting rid of libraries, driving out qualified teachers, experienced teachers, certified teachers, gutting wraparound services, janitorial services. Our schools are in shambles after this hurricane and the derecho, and still he continues asking for more, more, more. In what universe in your right mind do you think that we would ever vote for a bond? So I urge you to consider the words of this community and vote no. We do not want a bond. We will not give him money. No trust, no bond.
Thank you. That's all of the speakers that I have that are here present. I believe we have some speakers who registered via Zoom. Yes. Ms. Smith, okay, please go ahead.
Sarah Rivlin, please begin.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have to turn off my sound a second. Okay, hold on just a second. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. The cost of the bond is obscene. Please do some research into how much things actually cost. For example, he can't possibly spend $470 million on security, more than 4 times what the previous board estimated. I looked at actual purchases made by school districts and police departments over the past year. I was shocked by how cheap everything actually is when placed in the light of $470 million. Las Vegas PD spent $1 million on a SWAT mobile command center. The city of Houston is spending $50 million on an emergency response center. Add those together with perimeter fencing, secure vestibules, and secure doors for every single campus, and encrypted radios and Tesla patrol vehicles for every single police officer. Then add 15% for inflation. That's only $200 million. You could even add a doubled police force for 10 years and still fall 70 million shy. No trust, no bond.
Good evening. I find that just having this meeting right now is another reason not to trust this Board of Managers or Mike Miles. The whole community is in a disaster mode, but you're going to have a meeting that, sure, you're happy nobody's there in the numbers that should be there, but you shouldn't have had the meeting. You had plenty of time to cancel it and reschedule it at another time. But that's just one more example of why no trust, no bond. The things you want are not the things that we want. And it doesn't matter to us that he doesn't think they're important. We know they are. Libraries, wraparound services, those are the things that are important. And those are the things we should still have. Certified teachers, those are the things we should have. You don't need a bond, you need a redirection. You need a change of course. And I'm appalled that you didn't have enough humanity among you to cancel this meeting in the middle of a disaster. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Anita Wadwa, you may begin.
Good afternoon. I, like many people, are pretty tired. We're without electricity, and I often feel like what I tell you is not heard. So in the spirit of galvanizing the people who are in the space and also representing people who are not here in the mid-July, I would just like to repeat, and if anyone wants to join me, no trust, no bond. 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 No trust,
Thank you.
no bond.
Our next speaker, Amanda Parrish.
Hi. And volume on.
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
All right. Hello, Amanda Parrish, HISD parent, and I have a lot of personal comments. I personally think that you should vote no on August 8th on this bond, but to lean into some of my strengths as an Enneagram 9, I want to propose something that I think is completely reasonable and something that Fort Bend ISD did last year, for example, with their bond. This bond proposal needs to be broken up into different measures for approval for August 8th presentation. That sheet should kind of break out into 4 columns. It should be proposed estimate total, safe in schools, and then future ready CTE and restoring schools. That level of detail is what we should be voting on, 3 separate measures from the presentations that you are voting on, and then also us as the public. It's incredibly reasonable. Other people have done it. Other districts have done it. To argue that our students need health and safety, which is only 30% of the bond value, is why we should pass the $4.4 billion. Is just, it's not reasonable. No trust, no bond. Please consider this very reasonable request.
Thank you.
I think we have Ann Eagleton.
Ms. Eagleton, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Okay, can you please
Can
turn
you
on
hear
your
me?
camera?
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem, please go ahead.
Yes, I am representing the taxpayer interest here. Given the allegations from today's Texas Observer article, I think we need to pause the bond. I think that an investigation needs to be conducted so we can determine if we are working with honorable people on a $4.4 billion bond. I know in the past, Mr. Miles has said that his third future schools have all had clean audits. I would like to remind everyone, Enron had clean audits. It did not make them honest, and it did not make them honorable. No trust, no bond.
Thank you.
That concludes our Zoom speakers.
Okay, that concludes our Zoom speakers. Have any additional in-person speakers shown up? I don't have that, but okay, very good. Okay, well, thank you all for coming this evening to share with us this meeting, which is a very important meeting. Superintendent, I just want to start out by saying thank you from me and the board for the work that's been done to date to get us answers. As everybody on the board knows, and probably the public as well, we submitted additional questions after our last meeting, and we've gotten answers to those, so appreciate that. And you're here to do another presentation to answer some additional questions that are outstanding. The bond is really important. That's why we're holding this meeting today. I'm looking forward to hearing more about what we've heard from you already and the plan for the bond proposal. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks. And for the board, we have a copy, I believe, of what Mr. Miles is going to be sharing with us this evening at your seat, and then also, I think, electronically. Yes, ma'am. Superintendent, I'm sorry, I'm going to have you pause. We've got one last speaker who showed up a little bit late, if that's okay. Sure. Ms. Williams. Hi.
Sorry about my
No,
tardiness.
that's okay.
Traffic. My name is Michelle Williams. I'm president of the Houston Education Association. And today I just want to talk a little bit about the evaluation system. San Antonio ISD has recently stopped using map testing because it showed that it did not show the deficits in STAR. Those are two totally different tests. I implore you all, I've read your resumes. You all are intelligent people. Educate yourself on norm reference versus criterion reference tests. They are totally different. There are smart kids in those NES schools. Everybody should be using STAR for our evaluation. We should not be using map testing. STAR has its own STAR progress growth measure. Please, I'm asking you all on behalf of the teachers in HISD, because they are being unfairly dismissed.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Miles, for that grace. Okay. Go
All
ahead.
right, Madam President, members of the board, thank you for the questions and this another opportunity to talk about the bond and to get a deeper dive into some of the things that could be concerning, but also that are of foundational value for this bond. So today, I want to talk about three things just by way of preamble, and then we'll get to the questions that you have. One of the big areas, there are actually three areas of interest that the board had as revealed through the questioning last time and through the written questions. One is the process. How did we get to 4.4 billion? How did we determine the scope and scale of the bond proposal? So I want to answer that question. A second body of questions surround career tech ed. And why is that the approach? If we can provide additional detail and research and analysis that inform these CTE investments. So we'll talk about that. And then finally, Chief of Staff Carrie Briggs will talk about what happens if the board approves and then the public approves the bond. What sort of oversight, community engagement, and planning and execution will there be for the bond, both before the bond is passed and after, should it pass? So let me talk about those three areas. I said from the beginning, this is not a typical bond. Usually, or often, you have a series of buildings or renovations, and you take the buildings that have the most need. The problem here is that we haven't had a bond since 2012, and elementary and middle schools had not been entertained as far as facilities since 2007. So you have to think 17 years before we really had a serious investment, and all the while the needs have been growing. So there is a great need. It's actually over $10 billion. We have $10 billion of deferred maintenance, but obviously we can't do that. So this bond is a little bit different, and that's why you see three areas rather than just the third area, which is restoring Houston schools, which is building or renovating schools like many bonds out there do if you do every 5 years. The biggest need, though, is not just the buildings, but the safety and health, security and health safety of our students. So security involves things like fencing, single point of entry, a vestibule. We know that that's a real need in this district, but also in many school districts. That's been the state of the art for safety, is a single point of entry. Some of it involves lighting, some of it involves doors and better doors that alarm, things like that. On the health side, we're talking about mostly air conditioning units, the whole heating and cooling systems in our schools. And it doesn't take much to realize this time of year And at the end of the school year, the beginning of the school year, because of the heat, how we go around and try to keep our buildings cool. We have an aging infrastructure. A storm doesn't help, of course, and we've had 2 in the last 2 months. So I think everybody can see that need. The second area for us was future ready, because a bond is an investment not just in buildings, but it's an investment in the educational system. So if we want to help our kids long term, and it's been 17 years since we had a huge investment in elementary or middle, we also have to think about their educational infrastructure. For example, pre-K. Pre-K, very clearly what the research says, if you want our kids to be able to read by the time they get to 3rd grade, or the end of 3rd grade, we have to start earlier. You can't just start at 2nd grade or even 1st grade these days. Pre-K is something that our kids need to move not only to the state average, but beyond the state average and beyond the national average to get them ready for life and work or college after high school. So that's a huge investment. And the other bookend is also clear. The other end is our career tech ed, our CCMR program for our high school students. So pre-K and high school, we know that we need an investment on their career tech ed access and also the sorts of upgrades to their skills, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. Those are the 2 big buckets first, and then the 3rd bucket, of course, is rebuilding schools. That's the one we're most familiar with when we bring forth a bond, and we know we have a lot of need there. Let me talk a little bit more clearly about how much and these 3 buckets. The very first thing we did was we talked to a lot of people. We also got advice from 3 different financial groups. How much money can we spend, or should we spend, without raising taxes? We always figured, and the survey data from Outreach Strategy also suggested that people would be more willing to support a bond if we don't raise taxes, if that's possible. And so we did a lot of research on that, and we arrived at $4.4 billion. So that was the process. What is the limiting amount of money? And it ranged from 4.4 or 4.5 to 5 billion, and we thought a good number then, and the financial advisors thought a good number would be $4.4 billion. That would keep us safe to where we would not have to raise any taxes. So with that in mind, the very next thing was, okay, so how much do we need to spend on safety, both security-wise and health-wise? How much lead abatement? How many air conditioning units, or what was the extent of that problem? What's the extent of the single vestibule problem? And fencing when you have doors that open to the outside, et cetera, et cetera. All of that in a pretty rigorous study. Now, remember, the board, the previous administration and board had already done some of that work, and we borrowed off that work, and then we upgraded that work through Rice and Gardner. So we had experts doing this, and that's how we came up with an amount of $1.1 billion. You've seen the list for every school, and that's where that dollar figure comes from. But this administration made a determination of, if we're going to spend $4.4 billion, the first monies have to be spent on safety and security of our schools. If nothing else, let's do that. If nothing else, let's have air conditioning in the summer months. If nothing else, let's have safety with regard to security. So that was the first bucket. And then we went to what I talked about, pre-K and career tech ed. This world is changing fast. Technology has been changing quickly over the last decade, actually last couple decades, and it's speeding up. And our kids deserve upgraded career tech ed courses with higher skills. There's nothing wrong with many of the courses that we have at the moment, except that we need an and we need courses that are upgraded, that are high wage, high skill, high demand for our students. before they get even further behind and are less marketable. We'll talk a little bit more about that because I want to ensure that we're not talking about a different track than college. We're talking about an both and here. And I'll spend a little bit more time on that. And then finally, and we targeted that for $1.1 billion, leaving half of the investment to schools, meaning new schools, rebuild, or renovations, or expansions. And so those are the three areas. That's the process by which we worked. And to spend that $2.2 billion, there was a iterative process over the last several months, looking at FCI, looking at PASA data for demographic changes, looking at enrollment, looking at utilization, looking at where buildings are, whether it's on a floodplain or non-floodplain, looking at all the safety and security, the whole iterative process to say, these are the 43 projects that we can do because these are the 43 projects where the schools have the most need facility-wise. And that was the process, and a lot of people have been involved in putting this together. This slide here just shows that because we haven't had a bond, we haven't increased our indebtedness tremendously over the last 12 years, you're going to see in the orange our debt amount is going down pretty considerably next year. That allows us to go out for bond. That's where the blue line is if we go for 4.4, and you can see that it's below the tax levy line, the INS tax levy. And then over time, of course, we defease the bonds, we pay off the bond, and that's why you see it eventually shrinking. But this just shows that we have enough room here to go for a $4.4 billion bond. On the following slide, you know, it's with all the need and with all the interest that people have in different programs, it is hard to prioritize any bond. Even if it was a regular bond and you had, a district this size and you need to have 50, 60 buildings renovated or renewed or rebuilt, it would still be a hard task. And that's no different here. Maybe even more so since we have a great need on many, many things. So you can see some of those things if you look at all the things we could and should spend money on. We prioritize the checks at the top and deprioritize the ones on the bottom. That doesn't mean we don't need those things. I mean, I look at, for example, the one that pops out most to me is the bus barns. I've visited the bus barns, and now we have satellite. We will have satellite barns, so we still have our 4 main ones. We have 4 satellite terminals in addition. If you look at the bus barns, you go there, you know that we need new buildings there. Now, they're operational, but we actually need new buildings there. We prioritize the school buildings. That's a choice, and that's a priority. But, I mean, people there can make a case for putting them first, right? And that goes for all the things that we're not doing. It's a priority. And we have a great need on the top side of that chart. So in the end of the day, this is the way we prioritize the funding. We know that's not enough. We know that things are going to be left undone. But this is the most we can spend at this time, and it's the first investment. Let's not do what the district has done the last 12 years. Let's go out for another bond, in 5, 6 years, a different administration, probably a different board, maybe, who knows, but and let's the district do what most districts do, which is every several years, 5, 6 years, they go out for bond. That's how you should do it, so we're not at this point again where we have to make really tough choices and leave some things undone. So one of the biggest questions is, okay, so you have the 2.2 billion. How do you propose and prioritize the schools that have a lot of need? There are many, many schools. It's not just 43. So how do you prioritize? And this is just an example that I hope will illustrate how we made choices. Again, we only have 2.2 billion. It's a more narrow set of choices than we would like to have in an ordinary bond, but somehow we had to prioritize, and every situation is unique. We looked at so many different indicators. Only a few are listed here. So for example, these are the types of choices. It's not just a choice of build or not build. It's not just a choice of renovate or not renovate. We could do that, but we figure there are other things that we can do to serve more schools. So for example, in School A, these are high facilities index, facility condition index, FCI, of 82. That's really high. That's a building that's really needs to be replaced or rebuilt. It's also in the floodplain. And we know that in a floodplain, you often have shifting ground, and obviously it floods when it rains heavily, like it has in a couple times in the last couple months. And in this case, there's problems with the pipes, the roofs, the HVAC. I mean, this is a building falling apart, but it's 77% utilized. That means there are kids there, and enough kids that we don't want to disperse. We don't want to close this building. So this is a rebuild. This is building a new building on the same site and then demolishing the old building. That's School A. School B, similar statistics, right? Data, 79%, but it's not on a floodplain. And it has issues with the roof and the HVAC. It's also 77% utilized, so there's a lot of kids there too. So in this case, could we rebuild? Yes, we could rebuild. That's a lot more expensive, but in this case, we can serve the kids well, keep them safe with the renovation, which would bring that FCI down. So that's a prime candidate for a renovation instead of rebuild, and that's another choice that we have to consider. And obviously, we're looking at demographic data, we're looking at enrollment, all of those sorts of data come into play. We just didn't put it all down here. School C is a 60% FCI. Now, FCI of 60 is bad, but we have many schools in the 70s or 80s, so, you know, again, we have to prioritize. But this is not in a floodplain, and it looks like the HVAC system is the largest problem here. It's near failure. It hasn't failed, it's near failure, 77% utilization rate. Could we rebuild? Could we do a massive improvement? Sure, but it doesn't look like we need to. What we need to do is make sure the air conditioning works well. So this is a proposed significant investment in heating and air, or HVAC, and also safety. So that's not a rebuild, that's not a renovation, that is a safety, health and safety. It's in the first bucket. And then finally, here's a School D that's got a high FCI, and we know there's several schools like this, small utilization, 54%. It's not in a floodplain, but it also has roof issues, HVAC issues, and exterior issues. This would normally be a candidate for closure. Send the kids elsewhere. But we made a commitment not to close the schools. I explained the rationale, especially if there are kids in the area. And so instead of closure, we can still serve the kids with a consolidation or co-location. And so in this case, we would co-locate and not only serve the kids here, but also serve the kids in another site. So usually it's two schools coming together at a same site. not very far from where they already are. So again, this slide, I hope, shows that it's not just a build or not build. It's not just a renovation or not renovation. There's several options that will be the best for the kids in this community, in the schools, in the greater Houston community. And so with that and those guiding principles, this iterative process where we're looking at every site. By the way, I mean, we also looked at where they sit. If there's a highway next to them, it's hard to move kids from one place to another. It's hard to co-locate, for example, because there's a highway in between. Or if there's no land on the property, it's hard to build if you don't have any place to build it. And we didn't want to buy any land because that would spend more money, and that means fewer renovations if we had to buy property. So with that iterative process, we came up with the 43 proposed actions that you see on the right-hand side that we've given you data on, 15 full rebuilds, 1 campus rebuild where you have 3 schools, 2 elementary and 1 middle school, 3 co-location full rebuilds, which is 6 campuses. Altogether, we have 7 co-locations for 15 schools. And then you can see the renovations and/or expansions there. And you have data on each of these 43 proposed actions. And I'll await your questions, but I'll try to finish quickly, and then I'll bring on Chief of Staff. But I wanted to spend some time on Career Tech Ed, because there were a lot of questions about Career Tech Ed and the why behind it. So first, the question is, what is the problem we're trying to solve with Career Tech Ed? This chart right here would be concerning. I know it's concerning to you, it's concerning to me, and should be concerning to most people who are worried about how our kids fare after high school. You can see that half do not attend college. Worse than that, though, is 36% do attend college and drop out. Another 14% attend college and graduate, but 36% attend college and drop out. They do not finish college, either in 4 years, 6 years, 2 years. That's a huge dropout rate. It probably means that our kids don't have the skills in many cases, or the academic proficiency to finish college. Not all kids, of course. Life happens, there's many other things, but some of it has to do with not being prepared for college. Only 12% of our students right now are completing Career Tech Ed courses and then obtaining an IBC. In other words, only 12% of our students are getting an IBC. So many are attending college, 36% drop out, 50% attending college, 36% drop out. And those who are not attending college, only 12% are getting an industry-based certification. That is really low. That's really low. It means that we don't have the skills. Our kids don't have the skills, or we haven't helped them gain some skills to be competitive in this marketplace. So the problem we're trying to solve is threefold. Number one, we do want to improve students going to college and finishing college. That's something we still need to do. That's why we're putting so much emphasis on early grades, reading, math and science, the foundational courses. That's why the 9th and 10th grade have additional time in the NES orbit on math and on science and on language arts. We're trying to get our TSIA scores up, or ACT and SAT for all kids. Because this is not about choosing career versus college. This is about doing both. So one problem is, yes, we got to grow college access and completing college. The second problem is that we still need kids to have, or students to have access to high wage, high skill, high demand jobs, and have a pathway to that. And if they then choose to go to college instead of pursuing their skill pathway, that's fine, that's good. Or they may choose, even if they're college ready, to take the job in their career pathway, and that's okay also. But the point here is, can we design or can we help our students have both, not one or the other? It's okay to do whatever they want to do and not go to college. It's not okay to force them into one choice if we can do both, if we can prepare them for both college and raise their skills. And that, we believe, is the problem. This notion of skills is, let me take one more minute on it, because the notion of skills is huge. What you see on your screen is just part of the research. I do a futures presentation. I actually did one with the new principals yesterday. We talked a lot about year 2035 competencies and what the marketplace is doing. This one happens to be from Harvard Business Review, but there's many others that are out there, these studies, about skill requirements overtaking degree requirements. Again, that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to get kids into college. What it does mean is at the same time, you should try to get kids different skills. There are many companies that are now looking at skills versus diplomas. Google started doing that several years ago, and many other big companies have followed suit. Doesn't mean they're not looking for college degree. It means they're looking for college degree, and they're also offering jobs to graduates without college degrees, high-paying jobs. But you have to have some skill related to that. The McKinsey Global Institute does a lot of work on this. They put out reports every 6 months or so. There was one that I quoted, I think, back in January or February, and this one is just from 3 months ago in May. And they're saying the same things. Businesses will need a new, major skills upgrade. That will also include thinking, critical thinking, creativity, teaching and training skills. That's what businesses are looking for. And then you can see that occupations with lower wages are likely to see reductions in demand. So I think we have an obligation to help our students be in the best position possible once they graduate. Whether it's going to college, that's great, or if they don't go to college, whether they pursue the marketplace with higher skills, higher demand, higher wage jobs. That is the challenge that we have. So one of the things we know about career tech ed, this is more of the research. This comes from a 2019 U.S. Department of Ed data study on career tech ed. And you can see right there that students who have career tech ed concentration or program of study and complete a program of study, 8 percentage points more likely to graduate. This is a Department of Ed study. 2 percentage points more likely to enroll in post-secondary program, 5 percentage points more likely to be employed full-time 8 years after graduation, and 20 percentage points ahead of the median annual income 8 years after graduation. So the research is pretty clear about the benefits of career tech ed and the outcomes that will result from a good career tech ed program. Finally, when we look at the problem, one of the problems is access. This is our data, HISD, and on the left-hand side, you have 12 of the programs of study that TEA support. They support more than that, but these are the ones that are more related to 2030 environment and current job demand. And you can see that we don't have good access to those programs, except in the north, the electrical and welding, and the only reason why they have good access is because they have Barbara Jordan. And I think 8 or 9 high schools are routed to Barbara Jordan for those programs. So you can see in yellow the ones that are over 20% access, 20% of the students have access to those programs of study. Overall, the point of this slide is we have low access to a variety of programs. And this slide also, and I don't have a slide here, but there's some inequity. There are several high schools that have 12 to 15 programs of study, and then there are several high schools that only have a handful of CTE programs. So we need to expand our quality programs. Again, we don't need to take away from any high school or Barbara Jordan that's already doing this career tech ed program like cosmetology, culinary arts, whatever program they're doing, that's fine. I do think we need a huge upgrade. And when we upgrade, we should be thinking about high wage, high skill, high demand programs or jobs that the programs will help. Also, we need to consider the impact of AI. There's a lot of research too that students or programs that use AI, graduates that use AI in their work, are going to be much more marketable than those who don't have AI in their work. So that's the problem we're trying to solve. There are challenges, of course, to us trying to raise our CTE profile. One is infrastructure, both in either space. I mean, there's many high schools that only have a handful of programs. Part of it is they don't have the space for the programs, and they don't have the space for some of the larger career tech ed programs like construction in some cases, or flight avionics, things like that, or they don't have the equipment for it. The other challenge, of course, is time. We have HCC and other universities we can partner with, but trying to get kids from a high school to one of the 14 different sites for HCC is very challenging because the kids will come from all over and they have to go large distances. And this slide shows that, yes, CTE is great, but you also have the other courses that you have to get credit in. So you can't spend all your day at a CTE site. You have these other courses. And then another challenge that we have facing us before we get to the solution is TEA's requirements. TEA has slowly been trying to get more rigorous industry-based certifications and is requiring us, in order to get our credit for it, we have to do more courses. So you can see on the screen there, last year or a year ago, there were no course requirements, and all you had to do was pass an industry-based certification and you get your CCMR point or your accountability point for the state. This last year, students had to pass a level 2 course, and that course had to be aligned with the IBC, or the IBC aligned with that course. And so we did a lot of work on this. Next year, this coming year, 24-25 school year, students have to do at least 2 courses. More appropriately, they have to do 2 credits, and sometimes that means 3 courses, and then do an aligned IBC. And then finally, in the 25-26 school year, they will be, TA will only give us credit for completers, meaning they have 4 credits and an aligned IBC, which means that we have to think about the choices for kids, because in some of our smaller high schools, kids will only have a couple choices to follow a pathway that they're going to have to take for 4 years. or they're not going to complete their accountability requirement. So that's why you see us pushing for a solution where we have CTE centers. Because with this solution, students will be able to, this is what you see on the screen is the South Division. So we're looking for 3 CTE centers, one in each division, except the North has Barbara Jordan, and we would just kind of upgrade Barbara Jordan. But the schools in the South, the high schools in the South would have access, any high school, and any high school in the West would have access to their center so that they can take advantage of 10 to 12 different programs of study, high wage, high skill, high demand, and they can do it and still get all their other credits because it's close enough. The furthest one here is 6 miles. And so they can get their credits like the normal student or college-bound student and still go every other day for half a day to the Career Tech Ed Center. Finally, I know the board is interested, and so what's the outcome? What are we looking for? What good is this? And I think there's 2 big things, 2 big goals of Career Tech Ed. One is to provide 100% of our students access to high quality programs. 100%. And I think, you know, whenever there's a technology and advancement and movement, we have to be mindful of equity. If we don't, we stand the chance of more and more kids who are already behind or already not as marketable or already not college bound. We can grow that gap. And this proposal is to ensure that 100% of our kids get access. And then the second big goal is to make sure that we improve our programs, our program quality. Again, we don't need to take away. What we need is an and high wage, high skill, high demand jobs and programs of study tied to that. And finally, what that will do then is improve student outcomes. It's not just about industry-based certifications, but that's a real good skill to have when you walk across the stage and you have an industry-based certification. Whether you're going to college or not, it's a good thing to have for our kids that makes them way more marketable and encourages them to do more post-secondary education. That's number one. By the way, that helps with TEA accountability. That's not the main thing we need. The main thing is we need kids to get jobs and have skills, but it does help with TEA accountability. We also will get a CCMR bonus if we do both, both circles. So you only get the CCMR bonus, and that's $3,000 to $5,000, depending on whether the student is special education, emergent bilingual, or general ed. But we get that bonus if the student passes the TSIA or the ACT or the SAT, so they're academically proficient, more prepared for college, and have an industry-based certification. So that's that middle circle. That's what we're talking about here, not pushing the one track or the other. Also, it will expand our dual enrollment opportunities. I know a lot of people are interested in our partnerships, and in fact, Chief Hole had a meeting with HCC today about growing our partnerships in dual credit and also our involvement with them on CCMR. And then finally, you know, I know it's not a data we get credit for, but you know, the real job is to make sure kids are better prepared for year 2035 environment and job attainment. There's nothing wrong with the gig economy if that's what a student chooses, but how about we prepare them for getting higher wage jobs? And I think that's the real goal of education. These are just some, I know I've gone long, so I got to finish here. These are programs aligned to Gulf area careers. This is from the Texas Workforce Commission. And these are the sorts of jobs they're talking about on the left-hand side. So if the community were to pass this bond, if the board were to agree for us to put it on the ballot and the community passes it, we would get input from community, higher education partners, business partners, to really refine this list. But this is one that has already been vetted, at least by the Workforce Commission. And this is just an example of what we're talking about. When we say high wage, higher skill, what are we talking about? This is what we're talking about. This is just in architecture and construction. This is in health sciences. So many opportunities for students if they have skills. And again, we want to state up front, the Career Tech Ed program gets kids skills or industry-based certification, but in most cases, they still need further post-secondary training or education. They need further certifications. There's all kinds of certifications in HVAC. You can get the basic ones, and then you need some more specialized one to get even higher pay. We will work with business partnerships. Business partnerships can do a great deal. If the bond passes, they can help with upskilling teachers, funding equipment, hosting student work-based learning, and internships. You know, in another large district in Texas, Dallas, has 3 Career Tech Ed centers. The 4th one will come online in August. They have 200 business partnerships where the businesses provide much of the equipment. For example, if a student is getting HVAC certification, Train, the HVAC company, provides HVAC system and equipment for free to the district so that students can work on repairing and hooking up HVAC system, but they're using Train, so when they get their certification, many of them go right into entry-level positions for Train. And same with construction equipment, same with welding equipment, things like that. That's what partnerships can do. And then I've already talked about our universities and community colleges working with us. This is an example how it's very difficult for community college for us to take advantage of the 14 HCC sites, which have good programs, but they're singular programs, and they design it by program, not geography, so these 14 sites are spread out all over. And so to get students from high schools to those sites is just a logistical nightmare, and it's logistically prohibitive. And the same thing with Lone Star and San Jacinto. We would still work with them for dual credit, of course, but not to run our programs of study. We need our own facilities to do that. And we know that if we have a Career Tech Ed Center, and even if we don't, we need to work with the community on CCMR, so CTE programming, college coursework, PTEC, student counseling advising, and we need to get an advisory group together. We have plans to do that to help us with the whole CCMR planning and Career Tech Ed planning. And we hope to do that this fall, especially if the bond is passed. And I apologize for the length, but I am now going to turn it over to Chief of Staff Carrie Briggs.
Do we want to do questions, or Superintendent Miles, do you want to hang out and then we'll do questions? Do people have, you want to wait?
Whatever's your pleasure.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, Board Chair and Board. It's great to see you this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today about our early thinking and planning for this bond, should it be approved both by you first and then the community. I know it's been a hard week. People on our team still don't have power, so I deeply appreciate you being here and listening to us talk today. One of the things that we are thinking through as we imagine this, $4.4 billion multi-year, lots of project thing, is how can we ensure successful and transparent execution of this bond? We know it's important to the community, it's important to you, it's important to our team. So 3 kind of major themes I'm going to talk you through today to kind of give you some of our early thinking about from now to November and then after November. So oversight, I'm going to speak to your role, speak a little bit more about the oversight committee, dashboard, audits, different things like that. And talk about engagement, how we're planning for project advisory teams. The superintendent just mentioned the CCMR advisory group, other communication things, and then our implementation work, where we are, taking all of this in and hopefully implementing successfully both with our internal team and external partners. So, that in mind, let's talk about your role. The school board, you have legal authority in this work, kind of 3 main things. Obviously, in addition to your oversight and just kind of the questions you ask, but your first one will be to authorize the election order. So that's the August plan where we will come to you and say, here's the amount of money that we are proposing to borrow through this bond, the scope of it, the projects in it. Should you pass it and should the voters approve it, it becomes a contract with the voters. So we're kind of saying up front, like, these are the things we plan to do. And so you would have a very key role in approving that election order. After that, your next opportunity would be with each time that we go out for a bond tranche, and we anticipate 4 of them, you would adopt a bond order to authorize the sale, issuance, and delivery of those bonds and all the other elements within it. So, for example, if we went out like we anticipate and hopefully get the opportunity to in kind of late Q1 with our first bond order, you would be able to say, okay, we're authorizing you to borrow this much money for these projects, and we have to spend that money within 3 years. So that's your next role in approving the oversight work of this, is to the sale of those tranches and use of funds. Third kind of key point you have is on kind of the amount of funds to be used for the bond. So the first one is you have the ability to issue less than what the voters have authorized, should you determine that we don't need all the $4.4 billion. Hypothetically, let's say the state provided a lot more money to do safety work in schools. Maybe we don't need all that money for safety that we were planning to borrow. You could say, okay, we don't need all $470 million of it. Let's rethink that, or let's do something different. And in special occasions, the board can authorize changes to the election order. These are unique and kind of detailed if there's unforeseen health, safety, or structural contingencies. So those are kind of 3 of your main legal roles in overseeing this bond. The Bond Oversight Committee, we've talked about this. I've mentioned that we're going to have one. The district had one in 2012. We've kind of given you a draft of things, but I haven't really talked much about it publicly with you. So let me just kind of tell you what we're thinking and how we're imagining moving forward with this. The Bond Oversight Committee, their charge is to monitor the progress of the bond and keep Houstonians informed. So we're hoping these people are kind of out and about saying, here's what's happening. They're, kind of very informed about all the details of the bond, because as you see on that blue arrow, they're going to meet quarterly in a public forum. We would select up to 9 voting members, appoint them to staggered terms of 2 and 3 year terms. Likely we would let them repeat, so they wouldn't just be on there for 2 years. They could re-up for a second term. And so that's kind of the voting members. One of their roles would be to visit bond sites and review progress reports. So on these quarterly meetings, the team would be coming to them saying, hey, here's how we're doing in this year 1 work. We're going to do probably a lot of safety work in this year 1. So we'll be kind of out, telling you, here's how it's going, telling that committee how it's going. We would have them review financial reports to make sure we're being efficient and compliant with the use of those funds. And then they're just a sounding board as well, providing counsel to us as we're making these plans. Our goal, we have a draft of the charter. I think we've shared it with you. I know we shared it with the CAC. Our plan is to finalize it before the August 8th meeting, so you've kind of got that in mind, like, and here's what we plan to do with this committee. And let me speak a little bit about the types of people on the committee. The members will, and not everybody will have all 4 of these things, right? This is, different people bring different skills to bear. We'll hope to have 1 or a few people who have expertise in construction or finance or project management. Be immensely helpful to the administration. We want, 1 or more to be active in the business community within the Houston area. Love for them to be parents or guardians of HISD students. And I do think primarily we will want all of them to think about serving the community at large. So they won't be like aligned to a ward or a district or a trustee division. It'll be like community at large people. So that's some of our thinking at that. Like I said, we plan to finalize it for you in August. And then we have got a sequence of kind of milestones for each month. So September, we would open the application process. As applications come in, the executive leadership team would be reviewing those, selecting members, finalize those committee members by October so that we could name them ahead of the board vote, again, kind of to help the community understand that, like, we're serious about this committee. Here's who's going to be on it. We'll wait to see what happens in November. And then should the bond pass, we will onboard those individuals in December, kind of meet and greet, give them a briefing on the bond, get them up to speed on stuff, and then start their official duties in Q1 of 2025. This public dashboard will be a major part of kind of on-demand transparency and accountability for the community. We've showed you a couple of screenshots from Charlotte Mecklenburg's dashboard. Power BI's got all their projects in there. You can kind of see like how many projects they're anticipating doing, the status, how much money they're spending, et cetera. So you can kind of go down if you're particularly interested in one project. You're like, oh, I want to see the details here. Then you can click on it and get more information. So we would definitely have something like this. Our project management consultant that I'll speak more to a little bit later will help us build the plan and all the specifications that will feed into this dashboard. Let's talk about engagement. So I'm super grateful that we now have this wonderful community and communication and public affairs organization, and they've been thinking about, okay, how can we really engage the community and provide more communication around this work? So I want to just highlight a few things, and even with these in mind, we're still kind of doing research on what are best practices around the country in terms of how people are engaging the community and providing information. So thinking about doing some bond division-based town halls at least a couple times a year. We could go out to the community, here's what we're doing, celebrate successes, receive feedback, just really try to be out in the community. Our website, which if you haven't gone to, we're providing a lot of information there. We've got all the stuff from the CAC there. We'll just continually update that with information that anybody can access again on demand. Kind of thinking through some feedback tools, like, could we run some surveys? Let's have a dedicated email address where someone could write in with questions and we would provide timely responses. Do we want to do some focus groups or different things like that? So we're just still kind of like thinking about what's the best way to do that, but definitely want to be getting like real life feedback from the community on how this is going. And then project-specific engagement. So superintendent talked about the CCMR advisory group. The other thing that we'd like to start as soon as if you were to approve the bond vote in August would be community meetings with those individuals, with the parents and staff with the co-location schools. That's, it's kind of a different model. We've, explained it many times, but I'm still sure that the parents and staff and kids and, leaders of that community are like, what does this really mean for me? And so we want to do some community meetings for them ahead of, like, kind of in between your vote and the November vote. And then we will be constantly, thinking of new ways to engage. I did a little bit of research today, and the 2012 bond was like, Instagram started in 2010. So now we've got like, I'm sure even by then it was still a pretty new thing. Who knows what we'll be able to use starting next year. These project-specific things, the project advisory teams, this was an activity that the 2012 administration used. And essentially what it will be is we will have teams from each of the 43 schools that are getting a significant investment. So in the Restoring Houston Schools kind of bucket that we talk about, each of those schools will have a project advisory team. The district anticipates helping staff it. I think in 2012 they had principals lead it. I'm not so sure that we want our principals to be instructional leaders, so we may have the district sort of support the management of that. Even we'll have the principal involved, but we'll handle that back office stuff for them. Couple main things that we'll have them do: provide input on project design. So let's say you're blanking on a school's name right now, but like you're at a school and you're like, oh, I really want to speak to how do we preserve the history of the school, or how do we really bring to life something that was important to this community from the past 10 years. So they could help provide input on that design. This team would reflect families, students, staff, and community interests and values. They would be drawn, the project advisory team would be drawn from that school community. We want them to help support broader school and community engagement, again, kind of out and about, talking at their Little League and Boy Scouts and church teams and all that, like, here's what's happening in our school. And then we'll also facilitate tours for the project as things are ongoing and help and review progress updates with them. These teams will meet on a regular basis. We anticipate that they would start from the earliest of days, from the design phase, and kind of stay with us through completion. Of course, if you sign up for this, it doesn't mean you're probably signing up for 4 years of work. It will let you go off if you need a break, but this will be a way to engage these local communities to provide input in a really direct way. And then their feedback will loop back to our team and the project management consultant to help design things. I just mentioned this, the project management consultant, a really critical resource that the team is right now evaluating and trying to think about who do we select who will be a great partner for us in this work. So it'll be a team of industry experts who are responsible for the scope and sequence of this project and how the work can kind of operate alongside the community and market factors. Again, I kind of mentioned that, like, we're thinking about, 6, 7, 8 year project. There might be 300 individual projects when you think about 273 schools having some version of safety and health things, and then the 43 getting rebuilds, and then the technology. I mean, there's a lot of projects happening here that we need their help to come up with a comprehensive plan on timelines, sequences, and milestones. Again, that will filter into that public dashboard I talked about. They liaise with the operations team, and the two of them are going to be arm in arm making this whole thing happen. So that's where you see the PM and the internal expertise. Yeah. And then our team, they have a big job. I started working on this slide a couple of days ago. I was like, wow, I mean, there is a lot of work. And so you just kind of see, across the district, we'll have operations doing construction, a bond management, labor compliance, finance. Think about the procurement involved in this project. Just tracking the finance and accounting, ensuring our MWBEs get a chance to participate. Comms and public affairs, I already talked about that a little bit. We'll have a really important role. IT, legal, academics, my team, kind of a coordinating role. So all of us will be really have a major part in this work. I will say that in the 2012 bond, and most likely here as well, the district would anticipate hiring additional staff to help with this. We don't exactly know yet how many additional staff we would hire, but that would be an anticipated move, again, should the bond be passed. I just spoke briefly about the MWBE work. It's an important goal for us to have 30% of our contracts that are over $50,000 or more be involved with an MWBE. So the team has been thinking about how do we set up all of those vendors, all those contractors, all those small businesses up for success. This summer, we've been thinking about scheduling events, particularly for those communities, to help inform them and get them up to speed on hey, here's gonna be some great opportunities for your company to engage in helping us paint or helping us build or whatever the thing is. We will be bringing those folks in and providing a lot of good information. The goal is to create a simpler procurement system. I mean, procurement's never easy, but make it simpler for people who maybe don't deal with large bureaucracies on a regular basis. Increase participation of our MWBEs. provide an opportunity for lots of people to be involved in this very important economic development, and also ensure that we're making our commitment real to underrepresented populations. And so, timelines. Let's talk about these timelines. This is from now till November. It looks so easy. There's only a few things happening in each month. But we will be, each month we're sort of aiming towards like the important meeting we have with you guys in August, and then from there to November, we are working on selecting the PMC. We are doing outreach. We're thinking about the project advisory teams, like what that should look like. We're launching the MWBE work, starting to engage the community. We really want to bring those co-location communities together, probably sometime after the school year starts. Want to name the members to the Bond Oversight Committee. Once the PMC is on board, they will really start to dive into planning and start to create those like, okay, you guys have been talking about months, quarters, and years. Now we're going to start talking about weeks and days on like individual projects, like what's going to be happening. We've got the prospective bond vote on the 5th. We'll wake up on the 6th and see what happens. And should it pass, we go to December, where we would onboard the Bond Oversight Committee, start finalizing our staffing needs, and start to recruit those folks. We would like to pilot building some of the secure vestibules over that winter break so that people have a vision of like what that single point of entry could look like. And then beginning in Q1 is when we really get serious, right? We're bringing in the Bond Oversight Committee, our project teams are meeting, we're coming to you guys with that very first bond order sometime late Q1, early Q2. We'll start issuing solicitations so that we can execute on these health, safety, and security projects. And then Q2, we're meeting again, we're working with the committees, the project advisory team, and start to launch these first things. Again, throughout, I want to just emphasize that the relationship between our operations team and the PMC will be really critical because that's going to be like our planning arm. And then, lastly, just kind of want to loop back to where I started. It is a big job. I mean, this is a big endeavor, and I think we're thinking through as many variables as we can at this moment. It's going to take more bandwidth, so the PMC will be helpful. But we've been trying to think about like, okay, what are the next steps? How can we ensure we execute on this successfully? Oversight, engagement, implementation, all three of these things being really important to making sure that it works for our community. And so, with that, Q&A.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. I think that was fantastic, very helpful. Both of you, really appreciate it. I'll turn to my colleagues starting on this end. Any questions, Mr. Ravon? Or you want me to come back?
No, I'll just mention a couple of things. Thank you for sharing with us. That was very helpful. I think it's always good to over-communicate if we can, kind of those plans and what we're looking at timeline-wise. And so it helps not only us, but the full community to really get a grasp of kind of how to connect all the dots and continue to build on those things. One of the things that I would like you to kind of bring back to the fore is sort of the timing of when the board would approve the first tranche and when and how much time it would take before the first release of funds based on kind of financial planning models. And the reason I mention this is because the question I've got is, what happens if we didn't release a bond this year and had to wait another year, and what does that look like from an adjustment standpoint?
I'm going to ask Dr. Terry to come up. Basically, we have 4 tranches for the $4.4 million bond if it passes, and that would be over 4 years. And so Jim can answer the question about whether or not we can't ask for one of those.
Yeah, I don't see any problem in terms of having the money ready to pay as soon as the structure of the bond in terms of the facilities are created. The board will, if the voters approve a bond in November 4th, we would then start putting together, which is called a preliminary official statement. And it takes about 6 weeks. It has to get rated again by one of the rating agencies. Usually you get 2 rating agencies. We'll get insurance through the state if insurance money is available. Sometimes it dries up a little bit at the state level. We'll have a AAA rating. And we will then we will select a senior investment banker to take, and they'll have co-seniors. One will be leading, probably 2 others won't, and they'll then hit the market. So I would say, not more than 8 weeks, 12 weeks after the elections, we'll have money available. But also remember that you did a reimbursing resolution. So we would be able to dip into our fund balance and pay for anything that, happened before the money was released in, that 2 months period. And then once the money was sold, meaning the bonds are sold, we could then reimburse the general fund balance. So
Got it.
money's not going to be a problem.
Okay. And then kind of a subsequent timeline issue is just when would we expect shovels to be in the ground and projects to actually start?
I'm sure it'll be really quick. I know that they want to start on securities issues right away and health issues right away. So the design, and we'll start the design of some of the projects in really quickly as soon as the bond happens. Right now, we're in the process of selecting a project manager, program manager firm. We went through interviews today we'll go through 4 tomorrow, then we'll select one of those. And we will then take and bring to the board a pre-qualification for all of those architectural firms who have submitted their applications and they meet the qualifications. And they will then, if you all approve them, then when the program manager, the bond is funded, then they will select the architectural firms and engineering firms to begin right away. So we should be out of the gate November 5th.
Got it. And the first tranche was 1.5 billion, correct?
1 billion.
1 billion. Okay.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
1 billion, 1 billion. Yeah, I should know it right away, right? I think it's, actually, I think you're right. I think it's 1.5 billion. And then there's 1 billion, 1 billion, and 900 million.
Got it. And that's over a 4-year period.
Over a 4-year period.
Okay. So even though we're going for $4.4 billion in receipts, essentially, we're talking about spreading that out over the course of 4 years as far as the tranches go.
Yeah, I mean, to build, actually to design and build, some of these buildings, it takes a couple of years. I know when I've done it before, usually a elementary school takes at least from the design to open the door at least a good 2 years, and high schools take as many as 3 to 4 years. So I think the whole project, the way we've got it laid out now, will be done by 5 years. The money will be there, and I think that will then be ready to go for the next improvement to all of our facilities that is desperately needed.
Thank you. Yeah, that just helps. It conceptually, sometimes it's important to begin to think like, if something were to occur and the voters decided not to support a bond, or if what have you, like we're shifting considerable amounts of time and money and energy backwards. And I think it's just important that people can have the whole picture and see that there's a lot of work in the background. There's and you all have done a yeoman's job of getting these things prepared in a reasonable amount of time. So I appreciate that, and I just wanted to reiterate it.
And thank you, and thank you all for your support.
Ms. Mendoza, anything?
Yes, thank you. I want to jump to the MWBE portion. So just want to make sure that in the process of everything that we're doing to do outreach for the subcontractors and that are in the community, we can start getting them ready now and getting them ready in our systems and if they're doing work for us. And let's make sure we do that. I would also say that when it's out for bid and through the procurement process, that there's some form of the checklist or the scorecard or however you're doing it from a procurement standpoint, that there's some MWBE involvement. And also, I think it's really important to know when you're choosing a prime contractor or a GC that you also look at their record of paying our subcontractors. The last thing we want to do is have our community and our subcontractors not getting paid. So I think that's really important if you just keep that in mind when you're looking at that program and how that's going to be, the process is going to work. That's that. And then I'm hopeful that on the changing to the Lone Star, the partnerships that we're having or looking at with Lone Star and HCC and San Jack, again, I know we have some great partners and they're very interested. That we've said it a couple of times about them being kind of outside of our boundaries, and I get the time. I get it, that our kids have to be, bused different places. But let's not forget to ask our partners if they have any options, right? Where they might have some opportunities or properties that they may share with us or bring up before we just discard the location of it. So, because I know they're ready to help and they're there. And there's other organizations that have the programs like welding and plumbing and HVAC and that, so that we reach out to those too. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Campo, anything from you, or you want me to come back?
I'm fine. Well, first of all, I wanted to do a shout out to a few people. I want to give a shout out to our Community Advisory Committee and thank them for all the hard work they did with the community outreach, and especially the co-chairs, Judith Cruz, Garnet Coleman, and Scott McClellan. I think it's really important to involve the community. We all know that, and I know it's hard sometimes because it's hard to get out and get the word out. And I do want to thank our administration, Mike, Jim, and your team for putting together really a well thought out presentation and package, answering the questions that board members had. I mean, I know there were over 100 questions, and I thought the detailed answers were very good. I do want to point out, though, that you can't design the buildings in this process, right? So a lot of the analysis, and I went through the analysis of how were the estimates made, what were the contingencies that were put into the estimates, what kind of rates of inflation were used, and I think those numbers that formed the base for the bonds were reasonable, and for anybody trying to figure out what it's going to cost ultimately over a 5 or 6 year period when we're spending this money, you have to make those kind of assumptions. So there's no hard lines on these monies, because ultimately we have to design the buildings and we have to design the security systems and the CTE centers and all that, and that process will formalize what those numbers are and then ultimately be fit into the equation. So I just want to thank the administration for that. I think it's a well thought out program. And when you get down to the bottom line of this, I don't think our kids can wait. I think to Adam's discussion, if we wait, guess what? You're going to wait years from now. And the problem is we have HVAC systems and security systems and technology vulnerabilities today that are just would absolutely be unacceptable in a reasonable corporate environment or any other reasonable entity that had responsibility for maintaining health and wellness of people that they serve every day. So the idea that our kids can wait, I think, is just absurd and something that we really need to think through when we think about this. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Lindner?
Thank you. I'll echo Mr. Campo's comments, and thank you to the committee members who are in the room today attending and supporting the work. Thank you for being here. A few questions, but one that, again, to sort of build on Rick's point, I think that the other thing to consider around the immediacy of the work needed to improve our buildings is it's obviously important to have our kids in safe and comfortable schools, but it also is directly related to the comfort level and attractability of these schools to the teachers and administrators we're trying to attract to the district as well. So those go hand in hand. And so I can't say that enough. I've heard many stories of people leaving schools just because the AC doesn't work and teachers don't want to be there. Given the back-to-back storms that our community has experienced, one thing I wanted to highlight that's very front of mind for me is to the schools that are noted as being in a floodplain. My understanding is I think those floodplain maps are being revisited by Harris County, and how aggressive we're being around considering whether those should actually be rebuilt or moved. I don't know that that can be answered today, but that's a wondering I have, especially based on further discussions around the need for our area to just be more aggressive in where we build and where we should probably move buildings that shouldn't be in flood prone areas. Around just the communications public affairs team, again, really great to know that that team is in place. And something that came to mind from that part of the presentation was any comments or discussion, and maybe the committee heard this, around lessons learned from the 2012 bond that are being applied, anything significant. I think in neighborhoods that I am more familiar with, there were definitely numerous complaints about low quality of construction or things not being built to spec or to expectations. And so that's something that I want to highlight, that I think the governance piece of this should catch, but I want to call that out. I think there's ideally some lessons learned that we can map to things that we want to look out for in our future work. Building on Ms. Mendoza's comments around the business partnerships, I'd love to understand a little better, if we haven't heard it already, I don't, around what kind of skin in the game do our business partners have? If we could have a little bit more understanding around that, what's the commitment that they're signing up for? How do we know that they're going to stick around? And obviously, I think part of it is that our business partners are interested in building, people that they want to hire. So I think it's really important to maybe be more clear about what business partnership means for the district. And again, I'll echo Ms. Mendoza's, comments around, I really do feel that there's more that can be explored or understood around organizations wanting to work with the district and other ways that we can fill these needs for CTE beyond the district, carrying, let's say, the burden. What other ways can we share that burden across the community? So I think that was the key one there. Finally, I think in the beginning of the presentation around the problem we're trying to solve, I appreciate and respect that we do need to focus on, our students and their college attendance. I think one thing I'd love to see is something that that you talk about, I think, in the presentation, but what data can we start gathering and collecting around how much are our students making 6 to 8 years later in these jobs, right? It's easy to say that we want them to attain high wage jobs. It would be great for our community to start seeing, well, how much are they making right now? So if there's a way to get data around that, I think it might make more real the urgency around the need to make sure that our community is going to access the high wage jobs that we want them to be eligible to compute for. Thank you.
Ms. Ozian Bandy?
Thank you for the presentation. Appreciate the information. And just like my colleagues, Community Advisory Committee, you guys did all the hefty lifting for us. So we appreciate that. Lifting up a lot of the feedback from the community has been very helpful as we ask questions and understand as well. So I have some questions around the CTE facilities. Again, still trying to wrap my head around the need for 4 facilities. I understand what the rationale that has been presented to us. One thing I am wondering if it was considered, we have talked a lot about ensuring that our students have access to state-of-the-art equipment, facilities, to make sure they're upskilled for the future. And kind of to Jeanette's point, it seems like we are bearing the burden of maintaining a state-of-the-art CTE facility times 4. So for instance, you know, again, we're always one technological breakthrough away from being completely, you know, out of date with technology. So it appears to me, you know, again, say we have some technology and some equipment, and there's some more technology that's better and up to date. We have to replicate that across 4 different centers to ensure that our students are still going to be able to have the latest and greatest. And I'm wondering what has been talked about with the, you know, ideas around how do we maintain these facilities to ensure they're state of the art. We talk a lot about business partners and the industries that they lead, and, you know, they're on it, right? Because they are for-profit entities. They have to be at the cutting edge. They have to do what they need to do to stay competitive. How are we as an ISD going to ensure that we train up our students to meet those, you know, technological innovations or breakthroughs that could come?
Do you want me to respond?
Please.
So that's a great question, and that's one of the impetuses for having a CTE center, because a high school cannot do that on their own. It's too cost prohibitive. So with doing the research and getting a CCMR committee or a CTE committee that continually looks at it, and our own team continually looking at the programs of study. That's why we know, if you look at the Workforce Commission study, when you look at global McKinley Global Institute and what things are coming down the pipe, you're right, businesses do know, and so we need to tag team with them on getting the programs of study. There is no guarantee that it would last more than, you know, several years. It does take several years to retire a program of study, especially since the TEA is making this a 4-year program to be a completer, right? You need 4 credits to be a completer. So if we have to retire a program, we would not have any 9th graders coming in on that program, but we would finish out for 10th, 11th, and 12th. So it takes, you know, 3 years at a minimum to retire a program. But we also will continue to look at different programs. I mean, there may be some technology in AI that our students should be looking at, and, you know, and then we develop a program of study for that. In Charlotte-Mecklenburg, so in Charlotte, they have a career tech ed center called Philip Berry. And that building was designed to innovate and to replace programs of study that are no longer viable to newer ones. And physically designed so that many of the walls can be easily moved, so that if you need now avionics or agronomics with drones and you need bigger space, instead of the welding, which is a smaller space, they can easily do that. Yes, you still have to get the equipment, and there's going to be a continual revisiting of the programs of study that are there. So it's the right question. I don't have a great answer, except that, you know, every year we look at it and see if we need to change.
Thank you. And again, just bringing up for, you know, to ensure awareness. One of the other questions, kind of along those same lines, is have we looked at school choice as a way to solve for equitable access to CTE programs? Like, for instance, if we didn't duplicate 4 centers, for instance, and have the same programs, and say South Division had X, would it be reasonable for myself as a entering 9th grader and my parents to decide, hey, in order to access that program at the South Division CTE, I will need to apply for a high school in the South Division to solve for schedule, transportation, and things like that. And if I'm someone, oh, Barbara Jordan has this program, so my high school should be in the North Division. Have we discussed school choice as a option there?
Yes, and for some parents, they are choosing in that fashion. There's only, a dozen, not a dozen high schools, a handful of high schools that have a dozen or more career tech ed choices. Most of our high schools have a handful. And so we would run out of space fairly quickly. And most of the high schools that have a dozen don't have the facilities to offer even more modern sorts of programming. And it's cost prohibitive to do one teacher. So we would still have the problem of access if we just did choice in the district.
Which is an existing issue for us though, right? Considering
right.
wait lists for some
That's right.
programs. So that's that. Okay. And I think that that kind of answers my question. I was just very interested in CTE, so thank you.
Ms. Mendoza had a follow-up.
So piggybacking on Jeanette and Cassandra's comments, I think this is very important to us, and we all believe in the CTE. So I'm going to bring it up again, and a little bit about what Cassandra was talking about, of how do we keep these schools relevant, or these centers relevant? How do we make sure that we have the money for it, and that I do know, right? There's a lot of government funds out there that we can look to for the different schools and the different programs. I do, for instance, I do a lot of volunteer work in the East End and the maritime program there. I mean, it's incredible with all the companies and the corporations. So in the East End, it might be something different that we do with maritime, and but really partnering with the corporations, because they also want employees, right? As you were saying, they want to hire these folks. And so being able to partner with them, having them provide some of the funds for these centers, I think is key. Because it's there, and then always governmental funding if we can get it. I think partnerships, to me, is what's really important. And then going back to Cassandra's point, it keeps us relevant. It keeps that center relevant to whether it's NASA or the maritime or the oil and gas. So I can't just stress that enough, and I think we've all said it, is that partnerships are key, and how do we really get them engaged in these programs and the next steps, right? And then when this one's maybe already fading out, then what is the next step? And let the maritime tell us, or let the oil and gas tell us, so that we can accommodate. Just comments.
Okay, we're playing tennis here. Yes, ma'am.
I had a follow-up question. Sir, around the sunsetting of programs. Can you explain that process? Because I know that we were all introduced to some information around like the Microsoft specialist certification, that has been sunsetted because we heard from the industry, hey, that's not really relevant for a job. It's a good skill just to have. What is that process for sunsetting? And does it start with TEA? And just question about that.
Well, there's a couple ways, and Kristen, if you have more information, please help. But in the case of the Microsoft, it no longer it was retired by TEA as a program of study that would get you an IBC or a CCMR credit. So that's why that program was studied. Not very rigorous. But schools that have these programs now, and they have the autonomy, and obviously if they have a major change to a program, they have to bring it to the board. But if a program is no longer viable in a school, they can sunset that program and just not offer it to 9th graders or 10th graders if it's just a 2-year program. So that's the process of sunsetting.
Okay, first of all, I think I've already said it, but thank you very much for the information. Super helpful, Carrie. I've got just a question for you and Superintendent Miles as well. I think, to me, the very important thing that was laid out this evening was the involvement of the community and through the committee work that you're laying out. I'm kind of repeating back what I heard, which is that there will be a CCMR advisory group, project advisory teams on each of the individual projects. That is for the 43 schools that are being heavily invested in, correct? Okay. And then there's also this additional layer of the Bond Oversight Committee, which is a committee that will last the duration of all of the work that is to be conducted under the bond. Is that right? Okay. In addition to what I also heard, which was community outreach, especially with regard to schools that are going to be co-located or contemplated to be co-located, and other schools that are otherwise affected. So it sounds to me like there's a robust process that's going to be in place that the community can be involved in, and we as the board can be involved in, to ensure that, you know, all of these considerations that we have on a going forward basis, as things change and life changes, there will be some impact there. On the CCMR advisory committee or group that you're talking about, we heard from the Community Advisory Committee, which again, we'll all be very thankful for the work that they've done, because they really have set us up here for success with a lot of really great questions that I know came to you all and helped us as well as going out to the community and getting feedback. But on that advisory group, what is the timing that you're anticipating for that rollout in this overall process, and how does that impact the ultimate decision-making around what these CTE centers look like, assuming the bond goes forward?
Kristen, I'm going to ask you to respond.
Thank you. There's one slide that Mr. Miles shared that did share what our data is showing as programs that are high wage, high skill, high demand. But I think one noteworthy thing is that we wouldn't finalize the specific programs in a particular center until we got the feedback from the group. And in part of the advisory committee, we would want to pull in our partners. He mentioned we already were talking to HCC, where we're trying to figure out what programs have strong pathways to align with dual credit, to align with post-secondary continuation, so that we can be selecting from the high wage, high career programs that align to what post-secondary has to offer. I think at that point, we also would be getting additional input from the communities in that area to say, what are the programs in that particular division that make sense, and pay attention to what the high schools already have in that division, as well as what HCC sites already have in that division. So I think we showed an example of, on the far east side, there's an energy building. So that might make us make a different decision on the east side for what we would do with energy than what we do on the west side with energy, because on the west side, HCC does not have an energy campus. So we would want to be really thoughtful of the final set of programs in each of the specific centers. My hypothesis is that some of them might have the same, a set of 5 or 6 that are the same, and some of them might have some variation by center. I think there was a great example of the Maritime example, where as you get a little further south, you'll have some of that. So the advisory committee would really help on that. Every time we have a program, we would want the business partners in that industry to come help us design that program. And we can bring multiple business partners in for that program, and then we'd make sure we put the program in each of the 4 divisions in the right way. Our partnerships with ACC and potentially San Jac and Lone Star, they need to be advising collectively on all of the programs, because every single program needs post-secondary pathway and identification. So they would be really involved with us. And that actually is true apart from whether or not the bond passes, is really making sure we're maximizing the pathways for all of our programs at high schools or at a center.
Okay, thank you.
Oh.
And my question really is around when are we going to put that committee, the CCMR committee together? Is that like a fall of this year?
Yes.
Kind of? Okay.
Yes. Getting started right away, and our community advisory committee actually even wants, has talked about wanting to give feedback on the broader strategy. So I think that would be really important too, to share a little bit more around all of the things we're doing in the district, even for college access and college pathways already. So yes, we would start that pretty soon this year so that we can get some feedback early.
Okay, and I mean, I would expect, just like we have a draft of the bond oversight committee charter, there'd be a similar, I'm not saying it's the same, but a similar charter as to what their job is, role, responsibilities, and whatnot. Okay, very good. That's the only question I have. Anybody else? Ms. Lindner, go ahead.
I missed one question that I had noted, which is on slide 20, I think, where we talk about the challenge that students have limited time, and we want to minimize travel. My question there is, what flexibility does the district have to be creative around scheduling to allow for different travel, to accommodate for the travel limitations that we have? I see the example schedule here, and what I wonder is, what creative solutions could we apply to not make that such a limiting factor?
So we'll look more at creative solutions. There are the parameters under which we have to work, though, are the credit hours that kids need to get, because we're not just doing career tech ed, we're also trying to get kids into college. And so all the other courses that are required, but for graduation, need to be met as well. The creative solution may come in some cases with the school asking for longer school day or starting school early. Things like that might help. But you can see how tight it is. If we spend even a half hour one way, that's an hour total to a student's schedule, that hour has to be made up either before school, after school, or something like that. So I think individual schools could, especially for the ones that have defined autonomy, could actually seek those sorts of innovative solutions.
Okay, any other? Oh, yes, Mr. Rivon.
And I'd like to, and then I don't know that I'll be the last question, there may be some others, but as I was thinking about the piece that is so important to me, having a background in construction and healthcare, I've visited a lot of the schools, and I've seen the state of the facilities, and as have most of our community members in their respective areas. And all over this city and throughout our district, I've seen deteriorating facilities, some safety issues. You show pictures before of mold and mildew. These are critical issues that need to be addressed, and very concerning. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to share again why this bond is needed, and kind of bringing us back to the center, if you will.
Yeah, I think your intimation and Board Member Campo's comments is that our kids can't wait. We do have some serious safety and health needs today. And if the bond passes, that's one of the first projects we can work on right away. And, you know, you've been around the schools. I've been in over 120 schools, and in many of them, it just breaks your heart to walk around and say, you know, our kids are in these sorts of facilities. You know, they're resilient, they're just doing their thing, and teachers too are also, you know, resilient and doing, you know, just doing the good work. And really, we owe them better with regard to facilities. They can't wait, and so that's why bringing it now. It's been 12 years, you know, 17 years for elementary and middle. That's almost 2 decades. Our kids can't wait.
Okay, any other questions, comments this evening? All right. I think that's it for this evening, unless you or anybody from your staff has anything else to share. Mr. Miles? Okay, very good. Then with no, Yes, ma'am. Ms. Mendoza. Who's that? Oh, Mr. Moore, thank you for joining us. Did you want to speak this evening? Okay, give me 1 second. Anything further from you, Mr. Miles? No? Okay, and nothing else from the board? All right, thank you, Ms. Mendoza. Thank you, Mr. Miles and Mr. Moore.
Hey, thank you, Ms. Mendoza. Obviously, we've been doing a lot of work in the community. There's still in Northeast in my district, we're at day 9 with no power, 100 degrees. Trees are everywhere. I only had 2 things to bring up. Mr. Miles, I've gone through every school. There's a lot of schools that have uncut grass, have trees falling down. Can you please, within 2 weeks, address these issues? Because some of the issues was from the retro. And we're not using social media because since no one wants to listen to us, we're just going to show it on video. So I'm asking you, it's a step towards community engagement to make that happen. The other thing, the only issue I have with this bond is the co-locations. Those 15 schools need to be removed from this bond proposal. I'm letting you know now, if they remain on the bond, at a minimum 70,000 people will vote no. You can spend another $750,000, you will lose because you're not in the community. When I leave from here, what am I gonna be doing? All night helping to feed people throughout my community. We're gonna be cutting up trees. Like, this isn't a game. Like, this is real life. So if you want this bond to pass, take those co-locations because I can't in my right mind as someone that's from here. You're not from here, but you're my brother because we served together. I can't allow those schools to close because I know what's going to happen. Developers going to come in, there'll be eminent domain, and all these people that work so hard to become homeowners will no longer be homeowners. And you'll still be one of the most wealthiest men in the room. You'll be remembered as a whole transformation. If you want to do whole transformation, you want this bond to pass, do not put co-locations because I'm telling you, it's a promise. I will knock on every door in the northeast or southeast. I will not allow them to close because this storm has revealed so much to me. I'm tired of black and brown people being done wrong. I was right, I left City Hall. The mayor, he disregarded a lady that flooded and he told her 2 weeks ago, hey, I got this issue. His daughter was a center point lobbyist. I told him Northeast is always last. I've gone through my emergency fund. We filling up. Please, we're filling up 18-wheelers, giving out stuff every single day. These people, 4 more storms are supposed to come. So I'm just telling you, please. At Mac Reynolds, it's a tree down right now on the fence. There's grass that's uncut. Obviously, people send it to us. Just please fix it. I know budget things, you fire maintenance and all that. Just outsource it and take the 15 schools because I'm telling you, it will not pass. I know that we need it, but I can't do that to my community because when you leave and you retire and you go back to Colorado, we still going to be here. I'm young. I'm not going nowhere. Please. I got 2 more years to try to do what's right. I'm running for state rep next for my district. So it's no longer just about HISD. You forced us to become politicians. That's why Simmons and Molly Cook won. Because you didn't want to listen to us as community leaders that live here.
Mr. Moore.
One more. I had to just let my
Mr. Moore.
go to another state. Because I don't want them to go to Carnegie and then you do something wrong to my children because of them and then I'm hurting them.
Mr.
You
Moore.
already stop. At Mac Reynolds, you took away the magnet program. My children are gifted. They say the rumor is that if you don't respect anyone, you don't need them.
Mr. Moore, please wrap up your comments, sir, please.
I have to say this because if he doesn't listen.
Mr. Moore, sir. Mr. Moore, sir, you. Okay, ma'am. Sir, Mr. Moore, I'm sorry. Mr. Moore, you have Mr. Miles's email address. I have talked to you many times, sir. Sir, please respect our policies and procedures, sir. Please, thank you. I appreciate it. We have no further business to conduct this evening. Our meeting is concluded at 6:27. Thank you.